Now that we officially have all of the regular seasons out of the way, it's time to take an updated look at how this 2026 NBA draft could fall. Picks 1 through 6 in an updated mock draft next.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Tyler Metcalf. Welcome to Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, folks, we got a really fun one throughout this week. You know the theme by now. If not, if you're a new listener, welcome. Welcome to the party. We got mock draft week where we're going 6 picks at a time throughout the week. I'm lucky enough to run solo today and really steer this ship in a weird direction potentially with the first 6 picks of an updated mock draft. So we're going to get different voices, different evals all week long. It's always a really fun process, and sometimes things get a little crazy. But right at the start, I got the first 6 picks, and I have the Washington Wizards with the #1 overall pick. Based on the standings, how they fell. Obviously, this is pre-lottery, but the Wizards are in an awesome position here. They're finally in this spot, I guess yet again, where they can take a huge swing at a potential franchise corner, franchise-changing superstar. And for me, it's between 2 names, AJ Debonsa and Darren Peterson. AJ Debonsa, 6'9" freshman, small forward, wing from BYU. Darren Peterson, 6'5"-ish shooting guard, freshman from Kansas. I love both these guys here, and no one on the Wizards roster is really emerged to the point of making me feel like I can't draft someone over them. I like Trey Johnson a lot. I like Bob Carrington. I like Keyshawn George. I like how Will Riley really ended his rookie year. They have a lot of fun pieces, but none of them have really emerged to a sense of like, oh my God, this is a guy who is untradeable. He is untouchable. We're building around him along with our next pick. None of them have gotten to that stage for me yet, which made this even more tough because on my board, Darren Peterson is one in the same tier as AJ Debonsa, but I'm going AJ Debonsa to the Washington Wizards and giving them that real offensive hub that they have really lacked since basically Bradley Beal was in his prime. I do think the fit with Darren is a little messier, just given the plethora of guards that they have. I really like Trey Johnson long term. I think he's going to be a really good fit there. Just the upside and the offensive versatility and offensive growth that AJ Debonsa showed this year at BYU was insane. To start the year, when you look at that preseason scrimmage against Nebraska in his first couple games of the season, AJ's passing reads, they were really bad. They were slow. They were reactive. He wasn't utilizing his scoring gravity to create for others. But as the year went on, we saw all of that improve dramatically. Not to the point of him being like a lethal playmaker, but he's taking some major steps in that direction where he's one of these incredibly skilled, massive human beings who can get his shot anywhere on the floor whenever he wants it. He's so good at setting up defenders in the mid-range, in the post, getting to the rim, drawing fouls, getting really high efficient looks throughout the floor, putting his defenders in trouble. And then once the defense adjusts and starts sending extra guys to him, now, at least by the end of the year, he was showing the competency to use that scoring gravity to then make those kickouts, to throw a lob, to throw a dump off to a cutter and find the open teammate instead of just taking the really heavily contested pull-up jumper or sloppy shot. So the growth in him as an all-around offensive player just gave him a little bit of an edge because I think he's the exact type of player that Washington has been searching for. They haven't really been able to strike gold on any of these top picks in recent years. I like a lot of their pieces long term, but I think they're mostly complementary pieces. And if you can really strike gold and get that superstar on the wing, we constantly see NBA teams totally shift the outlook of their franchise because they're able to do that. I do think there's a huge swing factor. in AJ Devonta's development. And that's the defense. Coming into the year, I really liked his defense because he was constantly taking the toughest matchups. Like when we look at FIBA in his senior year against some of the top prep programs in the country, AJ was really, really good on ball with how well he moved his feet, how physical he was, how competitive he was. And frankly, the defense at BYU this year was just flat out bad. Now, the entire team kind of sucked on defense. But AJ didn't help that at all. And his defensive playmaking numbers were pretty abysmal for a guy of his stature, for a guy of his size. So hopefully some of that was just situational based and how much offense he ended up having to create and how much energy that took away from his defense. That's the optimistic viewpoint. But also with Washington, being around guys like Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly, where they're these really rangy athletic defenders with some upside as well. Hopefully some of that attention to detail saps over to AJ and he's able to improve and focus a little more on that end of the floor. And if he really does commit to that end of the floor, like we saw in his final season in high school, Washington could be really, really fun next year. Good? I don't know. But they're at least going to be fun, and they're going to be taking a major step in the right direction. All right. At number 2, the Indiana Pacers. I think this fell beautifully for them. Obviously, AJ Devonta here would be great, but if you're the Pacers and you're looking at the board with Darren Peterson, Caleb Wilson, Cam Boozer, you can't really go wrong. And if you're paying attention in that opening bit when I mentioned how my board fell with that top tier in AJ and Darren Peterson, that means I only got Darren Peterson left in that top tier, and I would be sprinting to the podium. I love Darren Peterson's game. I think the upside with him continues to be insane, despite a lot of the nitpicking with his production and his impact last year at Kansas. The numbers are still outstanding. And he put up the highest BPM for a freshman guard in the history of Bartorvik, which goes back to 2008. He proved to be a lethal shooter on ball, off ball. The off ball movement was sublime. The quick decision making, where he was never one of these guys who caught, held, surveyed, then went. There's no wasted movement. There's rarely any wasted dribbles. It was always catch and go, catch and react, catch and pass, catch and shoot. It was the processing speed with him is so impressive. And I mean, I get the concerns over the medicals. I don't think it's anything to be worried about. Everyone I've ever asked throughout the league, throughout the scouting world, whenever you ask about Darren, it's like, hey, is there anything negative with this guy? It's always just an emphatic nope, nothing. So you won't hear a bad word about the guy from people who actually know him and know the people around him. I've never gotten a single negative thing about him. So I guess you can, if you want to feed into the headlines and feed into the tabloid type of takes, it's not for me. And as far as I've been able to figure out, there's no substance behind any of it. But even when you just watch how Darren moved on the court this year, it was clear that he was not 100%. At 100%, he is one of the most dynamic athletes in this draft. He combined with the lethal shooting, the really fun secondary creation that he offers. There's so much more playmaking that he didn't get to show at Kansas this year. And the defensive playmaking at Kansas was really fun. He still needs to work a little more on his consistency on that end of the floor, but being on the floor with guys like Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nemhard, and Ivica Zubac behind him, and Pascal Siakam, with the coaching of Rick Carlisle, I would be floored if Indiana doesn't get the very best out of Darren Peterson. And then on the offensive end, he doesn't have to play point guard. He doesn't have to get shoehorned into this role that he is not. He is not a point guard. He's never been a point guard. He's a two guard with the creation abilities a la Anthony Edwards and Devin Booker, where when he's your secondary creator, when he's running that second side pick and roll and operating within the flow of the offense, his playmaking can be outstanding, but you don't want him initiating everything. Well, thankfully they have Andrew Nemhard and a guy by the name of Tyrese Halliburton, who's pretty good. So inserting someone with Darren Peterson's offensive versatility and athleticism into a lineup with all of those insane perimeter talents with that coaching staff on a team that just made the finals a year ago and did an extraordinary job of tanking and using this as a gap year, I think the Pacers could be right back in line vying for Eastern Conference Finals, if not another trip to the NBA Finals. All right, well, that takes care of our first two picks. AJ DeBonsa to the Washington Wizards, Darren Peterson to the Indiana Pacers. Next up, we got picks 3 and 4, the Brooklyn Nets, the Utah Jazz, right after this. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. All right, so that takes us to picks 3 and 4. The Brooklyn Nets at 3. I really struggled with this one. I've gotten to the point where I'm still very much in on Cam Boozer. I really like his game. I think he's an awesome player. But I have started toying very legitimately with the idea of moving Caleb Wilson ahead of him. Cam Boozer, freshman power forward, 6'9", 250 pounds from Duke. Heck of a year. Caleb Wilson, freshman power forward from North Carolina. Heck of a year before he got hurt at the very end of it, unfortunately, and his like hand and wrist injuries. I think it's a broken bone in each hand, weirdly enough. So nothing to really be worried about. This pick came down between Boozer and Caleb Wilson for me, and I really thought heavily about taking Wilson at this spot, but I just couldn't do it for the Nets. So I still went with Cam Boozer. And one of the reasons for that is I think he's one of these culture-changing guys. Not to say that the Brooklyn Nets don't have a culture or anything right now, or have a bad culture right now. I just don't think they necessarily have one. I don't think they have an identity. And I think Cam Boozer is the type of guy who can help instill that, instill high-level winning habits, high-level practice habits, and immediately raise the IQ of the team every second that he's on the floor, which is something that's incredibly rare to say of any rookie. So the fact that he can kind of come in and do that right away is a real testament to how smart of a player he is and how dynamic he can be. Now, where I've struggled with Boozer is that he's never going to be an NBA 5. The block numbers aren't good. The steal numbers aren't great. He's not that explosive of an athlete. And if you're really hung up on that, I get it. Because Caleb Wilson, I do think, is the bigger home run swing. If Caleb Wilson hits his 100th percentile outcome, I think there's a very real world where he's a better player than Cam Boozer. The problem is that I think Cam Boozer's like 98th percentile outcome to his like 20th percentile outcome are all higher than Caleb. Cam consistently gets classified as this safe prospect. And in a sense, he is. He's an incredibly intelligent passer. He sees the floor really well on both ends of the floor. He can get to the rim. He can knock down shots in the mid-range. I know his college profile didn't say that, but his entire high school one did. So the fact that he wasn't knocking down mid-range shots this year, that's a schematic thing because he just lived at the line. And I also really buy the improvements that we've seen in his outside shot, especially from just a pick and pop spot up standpoint. I have almost no concerns with Boozer from that in that realm. When we look at the Nets front court, I think he pairs nicely with the athleticism and ranginess of Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney. Not that those guys are necessarily your franchise centers, but Boozer's malleability on both ends of the floor, I think, really lends credence to just building around him in this spot and inserting his decision-making, his passing with the rookies that they brought in this last year, and Yegor Demin and Nolan Traore and Ben Seraf and Danny Wolf. So I think just continuing to diversify the offensive flow, the offensive rhythm, and adding another guy who's a legitimate dribble pass shoot guy on offense at 6'9", 250, it's tough. It's really tough to pass that up, regardless of how many nitpicks I may have, which mainly come on the defensive end of the floor with Boozer. I thought his defense this year was just flat out bad, which is not where I left his high school film. I really liked his high school defense. I thought he moved his feet really well. I thought his instincts on rotations and anticipation and verticality and being in the spot before he needed to be there, so he didn't really have to be this high flying shot blocker. I loved it, and we didn't get any of it this year at Duke, or at least very little of it. Now, some of it is schematic based, where Duke was just constantly having him camp out in the paint and gobble up rebounds and keep him out of foul trouble as much as possible. But in those instances where he did have to go out to the perimeter, where he did get challenged at the rim, he really struggled. And for starters, no one's afraid to challenge him at the rim because they know he's not this majorly explosive rim protector. He's really strong, really good with verticality. But if you get off the floor first, you're probably going to be able to score around or through him. The bigger concern, though, was how stiff and how heavy-footed Boozer looked with his perimeter defense this year. It was really concerning, and it's something where it's like, was he heavier than 250 this year? Did he really bulk up and lean into the power aspects of his game? It worked. He had an incredible season, but at the next level in the NBA, he's going to have to be able to slide with perimeter players way more effectively than he showed this year. Does that result in him slimming down a little to like 235, 240 to get some of that lateral quickness back? I wouldn't hate it as long as it doesn't totally take away from how dominant his strength is on the boards and on the offensive end. So is it taking Cam Boozer feels kind of like taking a really good offensive tackle in the NFL where your team desperately needs it. He's going to make your team better, but he may not be as sexy as that 5-star wide receiver on the edge. So I really like Cam Boozer. I think he'd be a perfect culture setter for the Brooklyn Nets to continue to build around. Now for the Utah Jazz at pick 4, kind of worst case scenario, just in terms of not being able to cash in on one of these big three. I went Caleb Wilson here. Didn't really think twice about it. I love Caleb Wilson. He is phenomenal. He is so good. But why the Jazz might be a little bit of a loser in this situation is not because they end up with Caleb Wilson, but because Caleb Wilson is kind of the archetype of like 4 guys on their team. They have a lot of redundancy with a lot of the similar type of player here, and it could get a little messy and a little bit backlogged. What Caleb Wilson really thrives at is just his freakish athleticism and freakish motor. I know we've said that a lot about guys in the past who just haven't done anything, who have really busted out, but there's more nuance and there's more craft and creativity and cerebral aspects to Caleb Wilson's game than a lot of those other guys, where Wilson is not just an athlete. He's a freak athlete. He's tremendous balance, really explosive, great physical tools, but he sees the floor really well. There's a lot of passing in his game yet to be unlocked. He sees the floor well on both ends of the floor. The defense has to get a little more consistent, but he covers a ton of ground, really versatile on that end of the floor, and he could be one of the highest upside swing guys in this top 3, this top 6 pick range. So I get that there's a lot of overlap with Jaren Jackson and Lauri Markkanen and even like Walker Kessler a little bit, but at this point, in terms of value and just looking at who is the best player on the board, it is by far Caleb Wilson, freshman forward out of North Carolina. All right, to round things out, we got the Sacramento Kings at 5, the Memphis Grizzlies picking at 6 right after this. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I love about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. Head to fanduel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in person locations nationwide. You can meet face to face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Okay, pick number 5, the Sacramento Kings. This one feels about as straightforward as you can get. There have been a lot of rumblings about who they might already be in love with, and that's Mr. Darius Acuff, freshman point guard out of Arkansas. What this dude did this year was incredible. I was kind of hesitant coming into the year on Acuff because the playmaking was always awesome. The rim pressure, the on-ball creation, it was so much fun. But I didn't really buy the shot. I didn't like the defense, and I thought there were a lot of times where he just over dribbled and didn't do anything off the ball. It's a tough combo. So I was fully in wait and see. Like, you got to prove it. I don't know if he could have done anything else to prove that he is kind of clearly the best point guard in this draft, especially on the offensive end. Throughout the year, Acuff took on a massive offensive load in terms of usage, in terms of creation responsibilities, while also being one of the highest volume and highest efficiency playmakers in the entire country. The way that this guy passed teammates open, manipulated defenders, threw lobs, it was outstanding. It was exactly what you dream of in your new franchise point guard. And then on top of that, he looked like Damian Lillard from outside. He was pulling up out of the pick and roll in isolation, hitting step backs. They even got to a point where they're running him off screens, shooting off the catch. It's like, where in the world did this come from? Because outside of a couple games in high school, this was not the norm. This was not the Darius Acuff that I scouted throughout high school. And when a guy really makes those types of improvements and does it from start to finish in a major conference, you can't deny it. It was legitimate, tangible growth. And from an offensive standpoint, there were few, if any, players throughout the entire country this year that were more impressive than Acuff. Now, I do have to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer. Some people are a little more optimistic with the defense because Acuff is strong. He is a good athlete. So if you want to lean on some of those physical tools, you can be like, well, he could be a good defender. And sure, I guess anyone could develop into something. I don't like or buy Acuff's defense at all. I think it's kind of a disaster, honestly. I think the screen navigation is flat out bad. The defensive playmaking stuff was mediocre at best. The awareness off ball was It's just not part of his game. The flip side, if we want to pivot back to the optimistic view, is that he had to create so much on offense that how much more could you expect him to realistically contribute on the defensive end of the floor? So going into a pro system where he theoretically doesn't have to be the end all be all offensive engine, maybe there's a better outcome on the defensive end just because he has even just 5 to 10% more energy to divert to that end of the floor. I'll believe it when I see it because the fundamentals, the technique on that end, they're just not good right now. But that's okay because the offense was that good. So even though Acuff is a bad defender right now, I think the offense has gotten to a point where it just doesn't matter, especially with the Kings, who hopefully tear it down and rebuild and let Acuff really start to mold this offense and set the tone for how their offense runs, in setting up guys like Maxime Renaud and Dylan Cardwell in different ways out of the pick and roll and really help Keegan Murray find that shooting that we saw from his rookie year and make his life easier with him and Nick Clifford as well. I really hope the Kings lean into the youth on this team, because if they do, there's a lot of fun. Even if they keep Domantas Sabonis around, that's a tremendous pick and roll partner for Acuff. But at this point, Acuff is the kind of guy where it's really rare now to see teams lean into the franchise point guard and really build around him. But doing it with Acuff makes a lot of sense. That's how good he was this year. Now, at pick number 6, the Memphis Grizzlies, I went back and forth pretty aggressively between two names. Two more freshman point guards. First, Keaton Wagler, 6'5", 6'6", point guard, combo guard, freshman out of Illinois, and Michael Brown, 6'5"-ish, freshman point guard out of Louisville. Two guys who had very different seasons. Wagler was this kind of unknown, unranked freshman coming into the year and just got better every single month. Michael Brown, one of the most highly touted freshmen in this class, coming into the year, we're like, man, this could be the number 4 pick. This looks like the best point guard in the country right now. And battled some shooting inconsistencies and back injuries. I think either guy makes a ton of sense here. And something I was really trying to look at was stylistically, how do they fit? And we know the Grizzlies run a ton of pick and roll, especially with Zach Edey on the floor, who is one of the best pick and roll partners in the entire country and the entire league. The problem is that both Michael and Keaton Wagler were two of the best pick and roll point guards in the entire country as well, where they both were around the 90th percentile in both pick and roll scoring and pick and roll points per possession when you include their passes. So there really isn't a wrong answer here. I love both these guys at this spot enough. Fence sitting, I went Michael Brown Jr. for the Memphis Grizzlies at 6. I just think the upside is a lot higher. I love Wagler. You know, I get like Tyrese Halliburton vibes with him, with his like 100th percentile type of outcome. With Michael, I think he's what kind of broke the difference here for me with Michael is the athletic tools. Michael is just such a freak athlete. Like, he's got serious bounce over the last year to 18 months. He's grown 4, 5, 6 inches. So we've gotten a major growth spurt out of him. He's really good getting downhill. He has that athleticism to put guys on posters. He's one of the most dynamic, versatile, confident shooters in the entire country this year, where the raw 3-point percentage wasn't always where you would want it, but the volume, the difficulty, the distance, it's all stuff that screams this guy's going to be a very good shooter at the next level. And even though his regular season wasn't ideal, I get a lot of like Tyrese Maxey vibes from him with what his NBA career could grow into and what it could look like. Because even though the shooting was pretty inconsistent at Louisville, the playmaking was some of the most advanced stuff we've seen from anyone. He was passing guys open. He was manipulating weak side defenders. He was making cross-court skip passes, using his rim pressure and scoring gravity to create for others on the court. It was really impressive. And when you think about throwing him on the court with Cedric Howard as the second side creator, Zach Edey as a pick and roll partner, and who knows what they get from or do with Ja Morant, Michael Brown is the exact type of point guard that you really take an upside swing on and look to build around. All right, that's where we're going to end it. We'll be back tomorrow with picks 7 through 12, and we're going all week with potentially some bonus episodes sprinkled in as well. But until then, thank you for listening to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings and making us your first listen every day.